Sheilah Sable here, out and queer entrepreneur in the capital region of Call Sheilah, your personal concierge.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. On this week's episode, we are welcoming Sheilah Sable, joining us all the way from Albany, New York. So, Sheila, welcome to the show. Are you ready to inspire fellow Out Bosses?
Yes, I am ready.
Awesome. So, really excited to have you here. And just a little bit about Sheila. She is the owner and founder of Call Sheilah, your personal concierge, where she oversees the delivery of concierge services, senior move management operations, and support for legislative advocacy and education organizations in Albany, New York. Sheila means business. She started her business after years of advocacy, organizing and hustling for various nonprofits in the Capital District. Her business serves busy professionals and people who need extra support and staffing in their lives and businesses. Sheila, you're doing important work there. I feel like I could benefit from your services. So why don't you kick us off and just tell us a little bit more about your business and what makes it unique?
Thanks so much. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here talking to you today, Rhodes. That's exactly right. Most people say, I could definitely use your services, which is why I started the business. I'm one of those people who definitely gets things done after years of nonprofit kind of program management and so forth. Working in nonprofits, you're always going to be pushing a broom or making a video or packing a box, no matter what level you're at. And so I honed a bunch of skills as a young person too, and decided to put those skills to work in a business that's called Call Sheilah, in part because my entire life was people were like, yeah, just call Sheila. She'll do it. She'll take care of it. So I thought, why not monetize that and see how many people I can help and also do what I love and get paid for it. So that's how Call Sheilah came into existence 3 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question for you is like, when was the moment when you decided I have these skills? This is the time to monetize. So you said 3 years ago, and walk us through that journey a little bit. You have that background in nonprofit and government. Even as hard as it can be because you have to wear all those different hats, there is that comfort of, hey, we've got a steady paycheck coming in. This is good. What was going on for you 3 years ago when you're like, all right, this is the time to do it?
Those are really good questions. So I tried to start this business probably 15 years ago, right when some life-changing events happened in my life. And I wasn't really prepared to be the type of person that you need to be as an entrepreneur, where you're putting yourself out there in a really positive way and so forth. So I've kind of always wanted to do this, but the timing hadn't been right until just about 3 years ago. I was the director of whatever I was for the New York State advocacy, LGBTQ advocacy organization, and things were not going as well as I would have liked in that organization. Movement jobs tend to have some problems within, as may have come up in other podcasts. But I really needed to do something different, and it was either the next step for me was either to become an executive director of a small agency in the area. And I just really could not picture myself in that role. So I just decided I'm going to go for this. I picked like 3 people in my life who could support me in ways that would make me feel like I'm not doing it alone, because the entrepreneur always feels like they're alone. I don't care how many people are around them. In my case, I always feel like I'm alone unless I really reach out for advice and counsel and support and cheerleading and whatnot. So I picked 3 people. I decided I would do whatever they told me to do, and they helped me. And, the rest is kind of history, as they say, but a lot of hard work and grit and commitment and showing up and pushing through things that I really couldn't picture myself doing. But it's all working out, and I'm thrilled because I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah. It's amazing when you're on the other side of it. That ledge seems so scary. And like you said, the timing was right 3 years ago, which 15 years ago it wasn't, but there was something over a decade ago where you felt that bug of like, hey, maybe entrepreneurship is for me. And for whatever reasons, that seems scary, or you weren't quite ready to make that leap. And 3 years ago you were. So I'm curious, even though you thought about being an entrepreneur 15 years ago, do you feel like you've always had an entrepreneurial spirit, or was it just because of the factors that were happening around you, in terms of the job landscape that really pushed you into being your own boss?
Right. Great questions. And hindsight is 2020. I've always had a side hustle. people have always said, yeah, just call Sheila, she'll do it, whether I was, getting paid for it or not. And sometimes I did. I remember as a really young person in high school, maybe that's not so really young, it is for me. In high school, people were like, yeah, I picture you behind a desk, just kind of making it happen, being a boss, making things move. And so I have always kind of pictured myself like that. And then, 30 years in nonprofit land where, I'd be in the job for 2 or 3 years and I'd be like, wait a minute, I got to get out of here. And then I'd stay for 3 years too long and be really miserable. I used to blame the workplace. And this last time I was like, wait a minute, it's really not the workplace, although some of it was unbearable. It was me. I was not cut out for 9 to 5, even though I had been doing it for years and years and years. I think the short answer is yes. I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit and soul, doing exactly what I should be doing.
Do you think that it's a relatively easy thing to do in terms of taking that blend of skills that you have from nonprofit land, as you call it, and kind of jumping into being the entrepreneur?
I do think it's easy, except the hardest part is the fear. But even that, if you have any experience walking through some fear, then even that's easy because, that just is, it's not that hard, although it may feel really grippingly hard. And I know that that's true. It is really easy. Everything is a transferable skill. I draw on my entire life to help me with my clients and their particular task or project or errand or logistics or whatever it is. I draw on my entire life. So, I'm grateful to have all that experience that I've had, my own personal and also the professional things that I've done helps me run my own business. And in some cases, I'm not running other people's businesses, but there are things that I'm doing for people that I'm also doing for myself, or I'm not doing so great for myself because I'm doing it for them.
Yeah, no, I wanted to ask that question because I have a background in nonprofit and government. And when I started to run my own business, I just realized how much of an entrepreneur, I guess an intrapreneur I was in organizations, right? And I was just curious if that really resonated with you as well. And it sounds like you were doing that. And the biggest thing, like you said, was that fear of the unknown. I've always worked for someone else. I've been a part of this culture, this company. You mentioned that you were towards the end of nonprofit land, you were working in an LGBT advocacy organization. So you know something about culture, right? Or at least pushing other organizations to consider, welcoming LGBT people and being nice to us. So, and recognizing the value that we bring into the workplace. I'm curious, with your experiences of probably okay cultures, maybe toxic cultures when you're working with someone else, what are some things that you're doing in your business right now based on your own experience, what you've learned in terms of really welcoming people who aren't exactly like you, really valuing diversity and recognizing that when you have a good mix, whether it's, you're contracting with other people or however you're building out your culture, are there some things that you're doing very consciously to create this culture of inclusion?
Absolutely. The first thing is really pushing through what my let's call them knee-jerk kind of beliefs are or knee-jerk assessments are, really pushing through that. I think that's a really important thing to do. I challenge people to do that. And sometimes, I'm human and I'm routinized in my thinking sometimes. And so really pushing through all of that and trying to be really mindful of who I'm bringing on my team, because it's really easy to bring certain people onto your team because maybe there's more of them or they seem to fit into, I need somebody to do a lot of heavy lifting. So a particular type of person maybe fits into that model or that need in my head, but it's not necessarily true. So I try to be really mindful of my first thought, which is generally something that needs to be explored further. And I'm really conscious about who I'm bringing onto the team and how I introduce those folks to my clients. I've certainly had conversations with people, because one of the things that I'm trying to do is to make sure that my team is as representative of the world as it can be. And right now it's a small team. I mean, I have like one permanent person and like 6 or 7 go-to people. And there are queer people, there are gender nonconforming people, and I try to make sure that those folks are, introduced to my clients in a way that there's not going to be any issue. I'm facilitating it. I'm not sending somebody into the lion's den, so to speak, where they're going to be, to the extent that I can control that, where they're going to be misgendered or worse. Misgendering is pretty bad, but I also, my clients, I'm somebody who, I'm an activist, and I like to push on people for various reasons. I do it to my clients. I look for openings with my clients to educate and, bring them along in ways that are important to my work and society.
Yeah, well, thank you as a fellow activist as well. Thank you for pushing your clients, to consider ways to have more inclusive cultures themselves. And also, huge congratulations to you in that you have a team, right? There's a lot of folks that I interview who are still kind of in the solopreneur mode, and so that's a huge milestone. So I want to just recognize that you're growing, and that's a good thing. And I really like what you said about being mindful, right? And how easy it is when you have a big gig that comes your way, and the immediate thing is like, oh, I know within my network, there's like 6 different people that I can go to right now, and how easy that is and how often that's done. And then, kind of recognizing for us as job creators that, we have the ability to create more equity. So let's look beyond just kind of our initial networks and think about who are also other skilled people who have completely different experiences from myself, who look differently from me, that really can add a fresh perspective to the business that I'm trying to create. So I think that's really incredible in terms of you kind of saying, all right, this is like my natural instinct, and I'm going to slow down and think through, some other folks that might also be really great, for this particular project. So we're gonna jump to a quick sponsorship break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more with Sheila. Hey, Out Bosses, Rhodes Perry here. As you all know, part of my passion for this podcast is to empower you and fellow LGBT entrepreneurs to cultivate a feeling of purpose and belonging in your business. To know that you can show up and be the most authentic version of yourself. Purpose, belonging, and workplace culture are concepts I take seriously in my own consulting business. In fact, I'm on a mission to empower leaders just like you and those on their way to joining us to cultivate cultures of belonging. In my upcoming book, Belonging at Work, I share some of my personal struggles of coming out as a trans guy in the workplace and how I leverage this experience as one of my business superpowers. Now, I'm on a mission to support you in taking simple actions that will make a world of difference for anyone who has ever felt as if they needed to hide important aspects of themselves on the job. When you commit to purchasing a special, limited edition copy of the book, a portion of your purchase will support expanding workplace opportunities for fellow transgender and non-binary people. An added bonus, your story about what it means to belong at work will be featured on the book's website to inspire others. You're ready to belong at work now. To learn more, visit rhodesonamazon.com or text 444-999 and type the word belong. Again, that's rhodesonamazon.com or text 444-999 and type belong. Okay, Sheila, so we are going back into the interview now. And this is one of my favorite parts of the interview, is really kind of thinking about your LGBT identity and how that shows up as a business owner. And the first question that I like to ask is probably one of the harder ones, which is, if you can think of a time when it was difficult for you, whether, over the past 3 years being a business owner, and probably more so in the years of nonprofit land, being someone who's LGBT in the workplace, and that, have you ever experienced a time where you felt like you had to censor certain parts around being a part of the rainbow family for fear of losing your job, for fear of losing a potential client, whatever it might be? Is there a specific example that comes to mind? And if so, how did you work around it? Because I know that a lot of our listeners really struggle with this aspect of, we come out again and again and again, and there's certain times, and unfortunately, especially in the workplace, where it just sometimes doesn't feel safe. So does something come to mind for you?
Yeah, too many things come to mind, or not too many, but flooded right now because it's constant. And I think of, oftentimes I'm the only, I'm not, I'm kind of butch, right? To use a throwback term, right? And I'm 50 something years old. And so oftentimes I'm the only woman in the room in, I don't want to say pants, but, pants and a vest. Right? Yeah. And so that often, even at my stage in life, often feels challenging to me because I know that I'm different. I'm different in the room. That often feels hard, especially at luncheons that have women's professional blah, blah, blah in the title. So there's that. And of course, I'm never putting a skirt on. So either I'm never going to these events or I'm going as myself. And,
Right.
and that's kind of how I push through that. And I'm always myself. I'm always myself. I never hide it. I have the honor and the privilege to do that. I don't really worry about my safety in those settings, but I do worry about, do people, my reputation kind of precedes me oftentimes. I've been around this area for a long time, and, my Facebook posts are obviously, I'm a queer person, I'm a social justice person, I'm a comrade and a co-conspirator to Black Lives Matter and those types of things. So I worry about my personal Facebook page versus my Call Sheilah Facebook page, and I do it anyway. Because if people don't want to work with me, then they don't have to work with me. And sometimes, late at night, I'm like, oh God, am I doing damage to my potential for business by, being so out on my Facebook or my, wherever it is. But one thing that kind of really comes to mind where I compromised myself, I was at an event, and this isn't so much being a queer person, but being a co-conspirator to, all marginalized people. I was at an event. It was probably 90% white. I don't know what the percentage was of not queer, but a lot. All of the honorees were white men. All of the speakers, the first three speakers, were white men. The lead-in was, a color guard with guns and flags, and then everybody stood up to sing, whether it was, Star Spangled Banner or My Country 'Tis of Thee or whatever it was. And I was at a table with folks where if I had stayed seated, it would have been really challenging for me. And so I was like flooded with like, this is what it means to really take a risk. And I didn't have the nerve to do it at that time. But I will tell you that what I felt after that it will never happen like that again, unless I fear for my life. But if I just fear for I won't get the business, I'm definitely taking a knee, or I'm definitely staying seated, because it felt so bad afterwards to not be myself in that room. Just for me, whether anybody would have even noticed me doesn't even matter. It just felt terrible.
Yeah, and I think that is a great example, and that's really you showing up as you say as a co-conspirator, right? But that feeling that you had is somewhat of a similar feeling, where it feels like, in the examples where you had shared, just in your gender expression, you prefer wearing more kind of traditionally masculine clothing, right? And you're going to,
Right.
Lots of different professional, quote unquote, women's events, right? And so it would almost feel like if you had to conform to more traditionally feminine dress, right? Like that would be a way of compromising your authenticity. That it just, you really strike what so many of us experience, where it's like, even when you're not compromising yourself, just that energy of thinking, I'm in this room with other women who are everyone's wearing a skirt or whatever the thing might be that you're thinking about, like all of that energy where it's like you just kind of showing up to do your business thing and showing your genius and what you do. There's a part that's just like negotiating, how are other people receiving me? Is, like you said, is this like impacting my business in some ways? And, I think the reality is that, sure, when we do show up as our authentic selves, there will be some people that just are not attracted to us, right? Because of who we are. And I think like the bottom line is like the deeper that we go into our businesses, we realize there's no way that we can serve the billions of people on this planet if everyone was attracted to what we can do, right? So we have to find the people that really get like, yeah, I'm calling Sheila because she means business and she's going to get the work done. And I think that 3 years in, you're thriving, you're succeeding, and you're finding the people that love working with you and they get you. And I think that that's what we're trying to create a world like that, right? Where our businesses really, we can support each other and people come to us because of the skills and the experience that we can share and help others. I thank you for walking us through that, because it's hard, and sometimes thinking about those examples where, like you said, there are many, I'm sure if we had a show dedicated to it, we can talk about some of our battle scars, I guess. And it's hard, but there is a silver lining, right? And this is what I love about the show, is that we get to lift up our businesses and talk about our superpowers, right? And so because of some of the challenges that we experience from being a part of the rainbow family, from being queer, however we identify, we have some resiliencies. And so I'm curious for you, 3 years into your own business, how do you feel because of your lived experiences, because you are a longtime social justice advocate, LGBT advocate, do you feel like because of those experiences, you're allowed to stand out in business? And if so, what are some of those, I call them superpowers, but what are some of the things from being a part of the queer family that allows you to kind of stand in your power as a business owner?
Wow, that's a really great question. Like I said, I draw on everything in my life. When I came out 30 some odd years ago, there were a lot of scary moments everywhere I showed up, because I don't know whether I was brave or naive, but everywhere I showed up, I was myself, and it was scary. And so I definitely draw on, the ability to push through fear, I think is a superpower. So when I'm in those rooms and I'm the only one, and even though people may not think of me like that, as a matter of fact, I'll have people say to me like, "Oh, no, you don't stand out." And then my superpower is like, "Yes, I do." So, it's kind of like a mixed bag. I want to stand out and I don't want to stand out.
Totally.
So that, like, living in that kind of, what's the word? Contradiction is,
Yep.
that's a superpower too. And, so I definitely draw on those experiences, as I have been the only in the room, or that I know of. I always remember what that's like. And I also, I'm a recovering person too. So I understand what it means to be honest. And not that people who are not recovering don't understand honesty and integrity and authenticity, but that's my spiritual path. And so I draw on that as being, I have to have the authenticity to be the same person wherever I go. So I definitely try not to code switch. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is something that's come up on the show. I think it was Jess Pettit who talked about code switching, where sometimes that's necessary, for some folks, where they've, in terms of job security and safety, and that can be helpful as you kind of step into your power as being more authentic, of kind of recognizing when that's showing up for other people. It could be your clients or whoever you're working with, where you're like, "Oh, I've seen that before." I've done that. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that could be helpful too for a client who needs to be honest.
And two things that are definitely like superpowers as I'm talking to you, and I love thinking about it like that, is my sense of humor, putting people at ease with a sense of humor, because sometimes I don't put people at ease. I know that. And the other part is, like, I really am a person who can really simplify things really well. I feel like that's a superpower too.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. I feel like with like all of we have so much information at our fingertips, right? And that can feel sometimes overwhelming and complicated. So if you can kind of streamline things, especially really kind of navigating busy people's lives and the work that you're doing, oh my gosh, like that is a superpower that I wish I had, because there's definitely a lot of complexity to the world that we live in today, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the superpowers are like, I think what you were talking about, and it's interesting, because in the beginning you were thinking about starting your business 15 years ago, and then you actually got started 3 years ago. And the biggest thing for you wasn't so much like, can you do it? It's just like overcoming the fear of getting started, right? And that is also, you're able to kind of leverage your lived experiences to say, you know what, I've been scared before and I've been fine on the other side. And it's almost like you channeled that to get started, which is cool.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And I feel like that, for a lot of folks who tune into the show, so many are thinking about starting their businesses. And I think your story hopefully will inspire them. There is the other side of that cliff, and it feels good, right? Like that you can show up and you can choose the conferences you want to go to. You can choose the clients you want to work with for the most part, and you can be you. And I think that's so powerful. And I'm guessing, like, considering some of the challenges that you just shared around just being yourself, being out in the workplace, and your superpowers, what would you want our audience to walk away with from this interview in terms of just being inspired to show up and be more authentic in their work, no matter if they're starting their own business, if they're in their own business, or they're working for someone else?
I guess my main thing is, and I say this to a lot of people, is don't make up stories. Reality is scary enough, but don't make up stories. Because I find myself oftentimes thinking, well, if I go here, this and this is going to happen. And I don't really know that. I mean, I have my own experience, but I don't have the experience of going someplace in an hour. So, I don't really know what's going to happen. I'm making up a story. So don't make up stories and just show up, be yourself. And also trust your instincts, right? When you get there, you have an instinct.
Yeah. And it makes me think, I really like what you're saying. Don't make up the stories. So these stories that we tell ourselves that are limiting beliefs, right? And I think that,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's how we've been socialized in this country, maybe it's different, in different parts of the world. But it almost seems like when we think about trying to do something that's new or different, we kind of go into that fear mindset first of like, well, if it doesn't happen, if I fail, and you kind of like see that course all the way through to like the worst case scenario. And maybe in certain instances, that's good just to kind of be like, even if that worst thing happened, if I'm still alive, okay, like I can figure out a way out of it. But, I was listening to this podcast the other day and it was like, flip that and think of like, what is the best case scenario? You start your business, you're able to help billions of people. You're able to bring in money that you can invest in social justice work, whatever the thing is, like kind of
Right.
try to carry out the other side of that. And I don't know, it's just something that I'm thinking about as you talk about, don't make up stories, but
Right. Which is definitely different than telling your story. I'm a big fan of telling your story, but don't make up stories.
Yeah. I think that distinction is really, really important, and that your story does matter. You
Totally.
have a unique story, everyone does. And by just sharing it, by being honest about it, it will help someone, if not many, many people. And I think sometimes we undervalue what we have experienced in the world, especially the hard stuff, that we have maybe a lot of shame around. So I think that's really, really good advice. So one other question for you, and I think you'll like this question just because of your background. As you're building out your business, you're already growing, you have a full-time staff, you have a kind of a team of other folks that you bring in on bigger projects. If you're doing it now, what are ways that you are giving back to LGBT communities, especially those of us who are really marginalized in the workplace? And if you're not doing something now, do you have like a vision, when you're making profit, you're bringing more money in, how have you envisioned reinvesting into LGBT communities or other marginalized communities around Albany or beyond?
So I was just having this conversation with a friend earlier. It took me a little while it's still taking me a little while, but I think I've found a couple of different ways. I mean, first of all, making donations is great. I mean, that's the easy way out. I don't love the charitable system in the world, but for better or for worse, that's what we have. So a couple of months ago, a client gave me like a 25% tip off of a big job. And, I wasn't expecting that. I had already made a decent living at, the project, and I just donated it to a camp in the area dedicated to trans and gender nonconforming young people, kids, summer camp, I think, in the area here. I don't think it's in New York, but anyway. So I just donated it there, and then I posted about it. I celebrated my client for being so generous, and then I said, I turned around and donated 50% of the tip to this organization that does this. I posted their website, and that was on my business page. So that that puts me out there. I mean, I'm already out there as a queer entrepreneur. Not that people think of me like that, but everybody knows that I'm queer. Well, they think I'm gay, but that's another story. I do that. I'm a board member on the New York Trans Advocacy Group, which is a statewide trans advocacy organization working on like policy and changes in New York State government and that kind of thing. So it's kind of connected to what I used to do, but it's trans-led and completely different because it's trans-led and people of color led. So it's very cool, and that's newish to me, although I know a lot of the players from my years in the LGBT movement job. So that's really cool that I get to do that without worrying about conflict of interest, without worrying that, somebody's going to find out and not want to work with me. I don't care, because that's always back in there. But
Yeah.
So those are the two main things. I'm locally involved. There was a little bit of an upset with our local Pride Center here. I was central in kind of being out and loud about what was going on there. If I still had a movement job or a nonprofit job, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I love the examples that you gave, where, like you said, for better or worse, the charitable system that we have, kind of giving excess profit, when you have it to causes that you really care about. And really, in New York, giving to young people who are trans and gender nonconforming, non-binary, that's incredible, right? And kind of really supporting those organizations that are stepping up for these young people is awesome. And also taking like the relationships that you have cultivated from the past and serving on a board that's really helping beyond looking at policies like at the state level in New York to make them more inclusive for trans and non-binary folks is even better. This is a question I don't normally ask all of my guests, but just kind of given your background, I think it would be interesting to hear your response. Coming from nonprofit advocacy on behalf of LGBT people and stepping into the role of a business owner, especially with kind of some of the Supreme Court cases right now around, can small business owners turn people away that conflict with their personal or religious beliefs? What do you think that the role of progressive business people is kind of a game changer in creating a more socially just world? Where do you see businesses fit in businesses like ours?
I think there's definitely a role. I mean, right here in Albany, we have, I don't know how to articulate it very clearly, but there's a bill that's a local, like Albany County bill that would give workers the right access to paid sick leave for every 30 hours they work. I think they get an hour off. I mean, it's ridiculously low, but it would help people tremendously who need sick time when they have to take care of a sick kid or they have to, take care of whatever they need to take care of. And so, of course, a lot of business owners are fighting this. From my perspective, it's a really small price to pay to make that available to my workers. And by the way, I don't have a full-time worker, part-time. I don't want to.
Sorry about that.
Anyway, that's okay.
Not yet, right?
Not yet,
yes.
Right? But so I have an absolute right, an absolute role in that. I can put on my letterhead, that says, I'm a small business. I have employees, which is true. And I think that this is not only the right thing to do, but the necessary thing to do because, people shouldn't lose their jobs just because they have to stop at a pharmacy to pick up meds and then go administer the meds to their sick family member.
Absolutely.
They should not have to lose pay and or lose their jobs for that. So I definitely see businesses like mine, social justice conscious businesses having an impact on local government and definitely way beyond that.
I mean, it's good to hear that because it's something that I think like intuitively corporations get, because they look at by participating in social responsibility, kind of giving back to their people, that keeps their people invested in these huge businesses, right? And then just kind of the role of small business owners. There's more of an onus place. There is a cost and there's also a long-term gain, right? And that you're developing your team is building loyalty to what you're building as a business. And I mean, you see that long game versus kind of folks in the short term looking at their quarterly financials and being like, hey, this is a big price to pay for me right now with paid sick leave. Right. There is a long game to it, and you see that. So I thank
Absolutely.
Thank you for answering that question. So I really loved your response to don't tell stories, don't make up stories, right? Like tell your story, but don't make up stories. And that kind of leads into the section of the interview where I really like to kind of focus in on like, what is the entrepreneur mindset, right? And my first question for you, 3 years ago when you first got started, I would imagine, especially because you were talking about overcoming fear, that there may have been like this feeling of imposter complex, right? Like this idea that, I'm not ready, who am I? I'm not good enough, all that self-talk. Mm-hmm. So did that come up for you? And if it did, like so many of our guests, how did you work around that? Or how do you work around it now if it still comes up for you?
I don't mean to correct you, but the better question is, when doesn't it come up?
Yeah, exactly.
Even
I don't want to presume. Yeah.
Right. No, even before this podcast, like, oh God, I mean, am I really, a person who, am I out enough? Am I entrepreneur enough? Am I successful enough? Do I know what I'm doing?
Yes, you are. That's why you're here.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so again, I just push through all of that because those are definitely stories and certainly not the way anybody in my life perceives me. So when people ask me about all of those things, right, like, oh, how are you doing this? Or what does it mean to be, clear? Like, how does the clear part play into your business? Sometimes I think it doesn't. And now I'm listening to myself talk to you, and it totally does. I'm not making this stuff up. It's me.
Yeah.
There are no times when it doesn't. You're always there.
Yeah. So like when it does pop up now, like what are your strategies? Like, do you I keep like a little folder of like praise or something, like when people are like happy with a project I did, I'm like, okay, I'm going to read that again. Or, like that just kind of motivates me. Is there something that for you helps kind of get through, we all have our ups and downs, but like on a day where you're like, oh, this is hard, like what's your strategy around that?
I try to be as kind to myself as I would be to you. If you came to me and said, do I really know what I'm doing enough to blah, blah, blah? Or even worse, where you came and told me a story that included, I don't know what I'm doing. I would say to you, is that really true? I would try to help you flesh out all of the genius behind having this podcast and how you got here and the steps that you took and what skills you used. And after 2 minutes of it, just like this podcast is for me, I would know, oh, I'm doing this. I did all that. I have a job coach and friend who she said to me, God, you're doing great. This was like a year and a half in. And she said, how did you do it? And I said, luck. And she said, oh, no, we're not going to talk about luck. We're going to talk about things that you've done. And that was really helpful. So I don't mean to be repetitive, but it really, the best skill I have, or the best thing that helps me get over that imposter stuff, is to be in reality, not in the story that I'm making up.
Yeah. I love that. And I love what you just said about be as kind to yourself as you would to a friend or trusted colleague. I think that is a really good advice, because I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that are similar to me, where I am like my own worst critic, right? So I think that's really, really good advice. And I appreciate that. Kind of building off of the example that you had of your friend and job coach, and this might be the person that you turn to, but when you do feel stuck, well, one, is it hard for you to ask for help? And whether it is or if it isn't, who do you turn to when you are stuck, where you're just like, I don't know how to do this, and you need kind of someone in your corner to be like, all right, let's talk it out.
All right, dude, this is getting deep now.
Yes.
So I had a sponsor who told me that asking for help was a spiritual act, right?
Yeah.
And that has resonated with me for, we're going on like, almost 20 years. So I have that in the back of my mind. And I tell other people that really well. And one of the hashtags that I use in my business is ask for the number 4, ask for help, hashtag ask for help.
Yeah.
Because Call Sheilah is a helping business. We do help people with their, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at asking for help. So back to kind of the beginning, when I said, I had to pick 3 people who I went to them and I said, I'm going to ask you for help. And it's going to be really hard for me to ask you for help. And this is specifically what I need from you. And when I push back and say, no, I'm fine. I got this. I don't need this. I need you to push back on me and say, you said you were going to ask me for help, and you said you were going to take my suggestions. And so you're going to do that.
I love that. I love, asking for help is a spiritual act like that. I've never heard that before. So thank you for sharing that, because that's definitely for me. I have a hard time asking for help too. And I don't know if maybe it's part of our resiliency, or, being a part of the Rainbow family, where it's like, all right, there wasn't a roadmap of how to live this life, so I'm going to figure it out on my own, but then in reality, we're not figuring it out on our own. We're blessed to have so many different communities under the Rainbow umbrella, right? And so, right. Yeah, that's really, really helpful.
Yeah, it's a good one.
In the beginning, you had mentioned when you got started, you found 3 people to help you launch your business. And I'm curious for you, were these mentors? Who were they in your life? Like, do you believe in kind of, you have a job coach, right? Which is awesome. Do you have like a mastermind group, or, a group of advisors that helps you along the way as you build your business?
So I think that the 3 people that were important to me were one woman was somebody who was we were giving each other permission to like wind it down at our jobs. She also had a movement job. So we were kind of becoming friends and giving each other permission to, get the hell out of there. The movement will survive without me, and those types of things where, guilt comes into play.
Totally.
So we were giving each other permission to do that. And she became one of them. And so pretty much anything that she told me to do, I did it. And the other was a best friend, a successful entrepreneur who, had a lot of kind of, just a lot of background in running a successful business and growing a successful business. Although, a straight white cis man was hard for me because I was like, oh, the benefits, the access that he has, I'm never going to have. And that was a made up story, although it is reality too. But I had to push through that to be able to ask him for the type of help that I was asking for. The other was my sister. She said, you got this. I'm completely behind you. So like that kind of cheerleader person, and then there was a one of these folks who did like this mind mapping thing, which, I find that stuff to be like very challenging for me, but it was so helpful. It's also one of those like make up a story like, oh, that's not for me. It's too hokey. Well, everything that I deem hokey ends up being really helpful.
Yes.
And today, 3 years later, only one or two of those people are still in the mix as much as they were in the beginning. There's a couple of different, like I like to think of myself as part of various tribes, right? So now now the entrepreneur tribe is, there are people that I could call, but I'm terrible at it, but I know that they'd be there for me. And one person who was a mentor at the local chamber entrepreneur boot camp, which I student at, she's somebody I check in with like every day. So, that's really important.
Yeah, well, you're now part of the entrepreneur family, so we've got a little Facebook community going on there. So if you want some like-minded, purpose-driven entrepreneurs, definitely join the club there for sure.
I definitely will.
Okay, we're now going into our bonus round where we're going to have the chance to get to know Sheila just a little bit better, gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work, and then we're going to learn one way to stay in touch with Sheila after the interview. Sheila, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
I am.
Okay, awesome. Finish this sentence. As an out boss, I believe.
I believe that you should be out.
Yeah, be your authentic self, right? I love it. Do you have a mantra or a quote that you reference that helps you stay motivated in your business, especially when it gets tough?
Well, I think I already said it. It really, ask for help.
Yes, that's great. Very good advice. Can you share one personal habit that helps you master yourself in your business?
I'm currently struggling with an injury, but, I run and swim.
Both activities are really good to clear your mind because so many of us are just spend so much time in our brains coming up with awesome ideas. Can you name one thing that you readily delegate in your business to stay focused on what you're good at?
No, I cannot.
Yeah. Join the club. Quick question, a follow-up question on that. For the part-time staff person, what are they doing? Because chances are those are the things that you want to delegate.
They're currently like servicing clients, but I really want them to do some of the back-end stuff and be able to like, here's 40 cards here's 40 business cards that I picked up, put this into MailChimp, or go through the emails and lose the ones that are junk and, highlight the one, like those types of administrative assistant type things.
Yep. Totally.
But I have too many issues to let anybody in on the back end yet. So.
Yep. So what are you most grateful for in terms of being a business owner who is also out?
I am grateful for people who came before me and people who did this before me.
Yeah.
Because I can be my authentic self. I mean, I happen to live in an area that is at least safe for me. I know plenty of people who are not safe, but I'm really grateful for the people who have, done the work before me to pave the way for queers and for marginalized people and women. We're clearly not there yet, but I am very grateful for my, for leaders of all the movements that I'm a part of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So 2 more questions for you, Sheila. The first, can you share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of out entrepreneurs to take that first entrepreneurial leap?
Yeah, one piece of advice. Well, it's going to be 2, and I think I already said it. You trust your gut and ask for help. Yeah.
I mean, it never hurts to reiterate those points because they're hard. Mm-hmm. They're really hard sometimes, even when you're doing it. So thank you for sharing those again. And so last question for you. First, I want to thank you so much for your time and for being on the show. And before we go, can you share one way that we can stay in touch with you and learn more about your business?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Facebook is probably the easiest. It's, facebook.com and it's Call Sheilah is the name of the business. And Sheila has an H at the end.
Awesome. And we'll definitely include that in the show notes as well. So for Out Bosses, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. It is always my privilege to connect with you. and so many inspiring outbosses like Sheila. So Sheila, thank you so much again. For details from today's conversation, go ahead and check out the show notes at outentrepreneur.com. If you are mobile right now, go ahead and type outboss and text that over to 444-999. And that is a way that we can stay in touch with you, and we'll make sure that you get those show notes. So again, text outboss, all one word, to 444-999, and we'll make sure you're connected with the show. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe, leave a rating and review in iTunes. It's the best way to get the show known. And go ahead and share it with a friend or a loved one who can benefit from the messages today. And as always, keeping your authentic selves 100% of the time.